Close your eyes for a minute, would you? No, you in the back. You too. This means you. Come on. Close your eyes for a moment. And keep them closed. And try to imagine a world, a different world. Try to imagine a world in which, instead of parents and children and husbands and wives texting a message, they would actually talk to each other. And you would actually be speaking to the person sitting across the room from you instead of SMSing. And in this world, instead of waking up to a computer asking you what's on your mind, lol, real people would pose questions to each other with all their hearts, ready to listen, ready to respond, ready to help, ready to actually be there for each other. Try imagining a world in which relationships were real and not virtual. And in that same world, real relationships of substance, of caring, of depth are so important. And the major concern is for someone else's feelings. What did Joni say? To say I love you right out loud, dreams and schemes and circus crowds. I've looked at life that way. And not just as a post or a comment or a reply or a tweet. And in that same world, you can open your eyes. In that same world that we're imagining, a different world, there's no necessity for therapy. There are no addictions to antidepressants. There is no reason for Prozac, Celexa, Zoloft, Paxil, or Lexapro. Because in that world, everyone knows who he or she is, wants to be, and everybody is in touch with the immediate truth about themselves, and there's no posing or pretending. And actually, this is not a world of our imagination. This world of real feelings and relationships and caring that we're describing is the world, as it were, that God, as it were, imagined and intended for us, and which all of us, as figments of God's imagination, which we are to strive for. And it's a world of heightened awareness and almost unimaginable, and here's the key word, sensitivity to others, to relationships, and to what it truly requires to build a relationship. And most of all, it's the sensitivity to ourselves in each changing moment. And this is the real world that we are now visiting in the book of Vayikra, the heart of the Torah, center stage of the reality that could be. And it's a world of intense and encompassing sensitivity to others and to the world around us. And Israel's goal as a nation, or rather, again, God's goal for Israel upon bringing her out of Egypt, is for Israel to live in this world of heightened awareness and connection, and to be an example to others, to all the nations, of what man could become. So here we are, in the book of Vayikra. And every day, the service in the sanctuary, the Mishkan, which becomes the Beit HaMikdash, every day, the service in the Holy Temple causes us to confront ourselves anew. And the service in the Holy Temple that we witness, it actually puts us in a position where we must reevaluate our very existence constantly. What a lot of intense work that is. And a man who comes to the Holy Temple goes through so many riveting and life-changing changes that he wouldn't have time to update his Facebook status. Because by the time he did, he would already be light years ahead emotionally and spiritually and psychologically from where he was a moment ago. Because the secret of constant teshuvah, repentance, renewal, is exactly what the Holy Temple experience encourages. And the offerings in the Holy Temple, which pivot man to deal so honestly with his relationship with the universe. The offerings in the Holy Temple afford an individual an opportunity to rehumanize himself constantly, at all times. And so no wonder, one of the only instances where the Torah uses the word Adam in the midst of all of these instructions for Israel, we've been dealing with this consciousness restoration program. And back in chapter 1 and verse 2 of Vayikra, the Torah said, Adam ki yakriv mikem, when a man amongst you will bring an offering. And here as well, in Parshat Tazria, this week's double portion of Tazria and Metzorah, Parshat Tazria, in the beginning of chapter 13 and verse 2, it's Adam, when a man will have one of these appearances in his flesh. There's a program here for the restoration of the divine image in which man was created. That's what the program of the book of Vayikra is all about. And now, in the midst of everything that we are experiencing regarding our encounter with ourselves and with all of creation and our role when we come to bring an offering in the Holy Temple, now we encounter a new dimension of that same sensitivity, the goal of the Torah, for us to become these very sensitive creatures. Now we come to these rules regarding, again, what we call, for lack of a better term in English, purity and impurity, tahara and tuma, these levels of spiritual balance. And indeed, in order to approach this, our whole mentality, our whole conception of the Torah needs to change, in order for us to simply get our minds around what it is that God has in mind for us. Because just as the korbanot, the offerings in the Holy Temple, we beg you to understand, is not about Him, and is not something that He needs, but rather, the offerings in the Holy Temple are completely designed for man to have the opportunity to absolutely redefine and reevaluate his life constantly. So too, the laws of tahara, of purity, are not about cleanliness or being soiled. They are not about sanitation, and these are not rules for the sanitary police to regulate. And that's how some people have this impression about Torah and about what we're reading about now. Okay, these people, now they were taken out of Egypt, now they're living around this tent, and now they have all of these rules about sanitation and cleanliness. That is absolutely not it, but rather, God has this incredible plan to raise up a nation that will become sensitive to the fine nuances of the human experience and teach the world how to live like Adam was intended. So now we have the Torah's laws regarding tsarat, which is sometimes translated as leprosy, which has nothing to do whatsoever with the famed disease of leprosy. And indeed, it's not even a physical ailment. It's a spiritual ailment, tsarat, with a physical manifestation. Because later on, in Deuteronomy chapter 24 and verse 8, in the midst, and this is the best introduction to tsarat, I'm skipping ahead, in the midst of a group of laws, there in Deuteronomy chapter 24 and verse 8, in the midst of a group of laws that deal entirely with social matters, the proper respect to be shown for human worth and consideration of others, there the Torah warns us as follows: be careful of the plague of tsarat, that you observe carefully and do according to all that the priests, the Levites, shall teach you. Now these nigaim, these afflictions, these appearances, they are described by our sages famously as being sent by God primarily as an indication I won't use the word punishment yet, as an indication of the presence of sins of the tongue. But they're also elaborated upon by our sages in the Talmud as being indicative of what one could call the 7 cardinal sins of social life. And indeed, our sages tell us in Tractate Brachot that, in this incredible expression, that being affected with one of these 4 types of nega, of affliction, is like bringing something to the altar of atonement. And of course, our sages tell us that the Metzorah, the one who is afflicted by this, by the appearance of this tzarat, he must dwell outside the camp, as the Torah instructs us, because he caused separation between a man and wife, God forbid, between friend and friend. And when he brings an offering to regain purity, the Torah tells us that his own personality in the unique psychodrama, the pageantry that he must undergo in order to regain purity, he brings an offering of 2 birds, and these 2 birds represent his own personality. Why? And our sages say very pithily, he sinned by chattering. And I'm paraphrasing and translating in my mind from the Hebrew, and this is very amazing. They say he sins by chattering, therefore he brings a twittering offering. Get it? Twitter. You can do a lot of damage by twittering, cause a lot of separation, God forbid, without thinking. Now, Metzorah, again, famously in the words of our sages, is a play on words, a contraction of mutzi ra, slander. And these 7 social sins, though, not only slander, are considered to be the reason why these nigaim, this tsarat, is visited upon a person. And they are enumerated actually as slander, spilling of blood, which is not necessarily literally, but even by hurting a person, perjury, sexual immorality, pride, robbery, selfishness. Our sages tell us that spreading slander brings about spiritual death, because it causes a loss of respect and love between people. So these nigaim that we read about in these parshiot, these afflictions of tzarat, they are some sort of divine sign of God's deep displeasure. That this person, instead of using the organs that he's been endowed with as a man for practicing modesty and truth and doing good and seeking justice and spreading kindness and peace, he has used his own body to make himself the bearer of slander and the spreader of the very opposite of those positive, manly attributes. And so this mark of deep displeasure causes this individual to be distanced from society and indeed from the sanctuary, which is the heart of our society, until he comes to a sense of true self-judgment. Again, the Torah starts off these rules with the word Adam, when a man will have in his skin one of these afflictions, recalling the original conception, the original divine conception of what Adam was intended to be. And it starts off, this affliction, as an appearance in his skin. And skin, or ayin vav resh, is related to the same root for being awake, to awaken, because the skin is the body, is the organ of the body which is sensitive and responds to external impression. And this is the body that was given to Adam. And the affliction, being a divine SMS, is essentially communicating to this individual, why aren't you Adam? Adam, Torah says, Adam ki hiyeh be'or b'saro se'eto sapachat. If a man will have on the skin of his flesh one of these appearances, why weren't you Adam that I had in mind? And so, here we are, having exited Egypt, which represents all of the morass and the negativity of what a society, a corrupted society, can become, can crumble to. And here we are now, setting up this model society in the desert, preparing ourselves to enter into the Promised Land with the sanctuary as the heart of the Jewish people. And the goal of the book of Vayikra, in every way, striving towards this almost unspeakable sensitivity, the goal is to create a perfect society, for Israel to resonate to the rest of humanity. And whereas there are those that look upon this whole concept and everything that we're reading about in the book of Vayikra as if these people are in the Dark Ages and they're just subject to all sorts of primitive beliefs, the goal here is to do something that's never been done before, and that still hasn't been done, and that still isn't being attempted by anyone other than Israel, and that is to take responsibility for every thought, word, and deed, and action, to truly reflect the concept of what Adam could be. And thus, what transfigures the sufferer of the affliction of tzara, the moment, the decisive moment of his declaration that indeed he is one who now must be set outside the camp, the diagnosis and the declaration is made by a Kohen. So that if one sees this affliction and is quite sure himself, based on his own deep knowledge of the Torah, that it is an affliction, it's not. It's not until it is declared by the lips of the Kohen. This is an amazing idea. The Kohen is the doctor? Did he go to medical school? Does he have a black bag? What is the function here of the Kohen to declare the tzarat? The Kohen is a representative from his very birth of constant God consciousness. And therefore, he, by his declaration, declares this person to be tameh, impure, shut off, shut out from society and from the sanctuary, which is at the very heart of our society, because he has made himself unworthy of his inclusion temporarily in the national circle. And the motive of his expulsion is not quarantine, is not to keep the contagions at bay, but rather to induce a situation wherein he can engage in serious contemplation and self-introspection so that he can examine how he has behaved until now and hopefully reflect upon his words, his feelings, his actions in his social contexts, so that he will appreciate more his fellow man. And now, through his separation, it will bring about serious change in his attitude and feelings. People hurt easy. You know, you can hurt someone and not even know it. And who takes responsibility nowadays? The Torah is striving for a beautiful world. The Torah is striving for a world in which at every moment we never lose the connection to the totality of God consciousness, which is from where we derive our very life force. We take responsibility for every interaction, for every moment that we have with another human being. And so these laws, far from being something that hold us back or keep us in some sort of primitive mindset or show some sort of aspect of fear or darkness in our lives, on the very opposite. The Torah's goal is to elevate Israel to the position of being a representative of Adam, and to bring back the divine image of Adam, which is something that the whole world can be taught, not as a post, as a comment, as a reply, as a tweet, but as a real life experience of what the majesty, the grandeur, the hope, the promise, the aspiration of the human condition could really be.